Hey, Baldies Thoughts, you made a comment on a video I made recently that I want to respond to. And the reason is I can find nobody else that understands what I'm doing. It's so deep, it's just very bizarre. So as you're talking about things and what you got going on, I'm like, okay, you're very close to seeing what I have going on. And there's more to it. Yeah, my name is Dan Paulson. Everyone else, welcome to the video. Let me go ahead and read the comments and then talk about some things. Certainly it is so big that you can't cover it all in a video. There would have to be some sort of a back and forth dialogue and the ability to stop somebody and say, oh, wait a minute. What do you mean when you use that word? How are you defining that? Because it gets so complicated and it's very big. And people are coming from so many different places. It's hard to figure it out. This is very old. It is something that would have been required for the person to have these stories memorized very deeply in order to play them out in the mind. They're very mental is how they work. We are not even doing that. That's why people can't get there. They have to play it out in their mind. Each of us has to do it that way. It's the only way to really see how it works. Okay, what was your comment here? Really appreciated this breakdown of Chapter 12. There's a lot of deep insight in the way you framed the human life template and how these ancient stories mirror stages in our own development. That said, I found myself seeing it a little differently, more in line with Bob Proctor's teachings on paradigms and subconscious programming. From birth until about age 7, we live entirely in our subconscious. No filter, no ability to reject what we're told or shown. We just absorb. Okay, I want to talk about the way that I understand that there. That at first, to me, when we're born, we don't have a subconscious. The subconscious ends up being the bundle of memories that we live through. And that's not bad stuff. It's bad stuff, good stuff. It's everything. It's I got molested, yeah. I got raped, yeah. But I also ate apple pie, and I loved that. I went swimming with my buddies, and we had so much fun. I loved my girlfriend, and I've had some wonderful things and some bad things happen in life. I know what yellow is. I know what bananas are. I know what space travel is about. At some point in time, all of this knowledge, it becomes our subconscious. That is what is running in the background when we are living life and paying attention to things, or maybe not paying attention to things, and something is playing out inside of us. It's that bundle of memories right there. And I'm going to call that the subconscious, that we're actually born without a subconscious. We're born only with a conscious. And that's why we're not self-aware. We don't have those memories in place to really have self-aware cognition of somebody. You just look back at your life. I don't know how to explain that part of mental development, but you could look and see that for the first few years of life, I don't even remember it. The brain wasn't developed enough to have memory of it. So I'm saying at that point in time, we were not living through a subconscious. We were living through just the world experience, gathering things and slowly growing brain connections from wherever we come from, and that we're going to be that person. So we're in agreement really with how things are. I think we are. We're just using different kind of verbiage. And because of the nature of the videos, I think it's easy to leave out details when you're just flying along, making video after video like this. So I want to clarify that I'm in line with what you're talking about. The verbiage, I'm going to say, is a little bit different. But if you're looking at the mystery of the stories in the Genesis, that's exactly what Adam and Eve is. At first, we're there conscious, and that Eve is not there until created from the rib, from the side. Eve emerges from the consciousness later on. This creation story is describing that point in time in our life. And then when Eve is there, that means we now have enough memory to have that inner cognition. Okay, does that make sense? So conscious, born, memories develop, that becomes the subconscious. Adam, born, he names things. First he comes with things already named. He's told that he's going to live through cause and effect, the trees grow, that create. But initially, Adam is there by himself in the story. That represents the time where the consciousness is there. That it is setting up conditions for how the story is going to work. There is something nested in here. The story is purposeful. Is it factual? It can't be. No, that's ridiculous. For people that think it's factual, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. It absolutely means something, however. For the people that say it didn't happen, you're right as well. However, again, it's like arguing over whether or not the tortoise and the hare race actually happened without seeing. You know what? That's not what it's about. There's something else in there. That's exactly how the Bible is. It's a spiritual path. The story is the carrier. Okay, so what happens then when Eve comes about? Eve is the one that gets tempted. That's the inner self that, where does the bad happen? When you're walking around later and it continues to reemerge, it's coming from a memory location. This represents the inner self, the bundle of memories. It is now there. It is inside of Eve. It is inside of the subconscious. The subconscious is subservient to the conscious because it is created from the conscious decisions and the way we perceive those and store those. That means that Eve is subservient to the male right there. So they're using analogous terms that exist in the culture to nevertheless maintain a mental hierarchy and how this works. That the inner self is a product of the conscious experiences and the way we judge and hold those judgments in our memory. That is what we become, and that is how it becomes corrupt. And when childbirth happens, analogous. Whenever this acts out of you again, it's painful. Pain in childbirth. What do? You just grab whatever is already working out there and say, this is perfect. The inner being has this act out again, this anger, this violence, this fear, this shame, whatever it is. Every time it comes out, it's going to hurt. So there's your cyclical pain. And then Adam is told you're going to go off and live life unaware of its glory, and you're not going to get the full benefits of it. That represents the time in our life when we're living unaware. We're going to go off and go, what? Go to school, go to the military, go to college, go get a job at the local gas station or down at the farmer's, depends on where you live. Somewhere we're going to go off in life and start having life experiences and get friends and judge this and not be aware of the time that we're doing it. As we get into the story, we see a lineage going by. We see tent building and, brass making and things like that. That represents this time in our life where that happens. Then the lineage time goes by. Then the destruction has to happen. This is a life cycle. You're born, your subconscious is a product of your experiences. It's going to be painful. You're going to go have life experiences unaware of it. And at some point in time, if you're the right person, you're going to get to a point where you go, God, I've got to destroy my world. I need to turn inward and drown it out. That right there is, to me, how the mythology is written. But it's not just in the Bible. It is elsewhere, too. That starts getting too thick. It'll make it too long, though. We'll just go on here. Where did we leave here? From birth until about age 7, we live entirely in our subconscious. No filter, no ability to reject what we're told or shown. We just absorb. I think we're not living in our subconscious. We're living just in the moment. But as we're judging and having experiences and learning, that we are creating our subconscious. We are absorbing. So that's the same thing as creating our Eve if we pull it out of the story. It's a mental process. It always is a mental process, which is going to lead to something else down here. That early programming becomes the paradigm that drives most of our behavior without us even realizing it. Yep. So when I hear leave your country, your kindred, your father's house, I don't hear geography. I hear conditioning. I hear the call to step away from the beliefs and emotional imprints that were handed to us and to consciously build something new. You're exactly right. And, when I say leaving the past, leaving where you are, leaving your mother, father, growing up in life, there's a point in time where I'm not sure exactly what that transition is. But ultimately, this is all a mental path. So it does represent exactly that. It represents that you have taken this time in your life where you were living in such a way that you were not judging anything. You're that little kid. Whatever the age is. I wouldn't say 7. I would say from 5 to 7, 8, 9, 10. Depends on the family. Depends on the location. Is it a violent place or is it a very tender and loving place? That there's going to be variations. Some kids from a very early age are going to start remembering violence and hate and pain, judgments, beatings, things like that. Other children, that's not going to happen until they go out and leave home and start seeing people do things out in the world and go, my God, how come people are that way? They're gonna start learning it like maybe later on in life. So the point there is a mental process. It's the time that you go from an innocent childhood self, presumably, and there might be people that are just children that are born in situations they're not wanted, and from the get-go they're beat and bit. So the material presumes the idea that everything is okay. And that you're not in a situation like that. So you different things have to happen when that situation is there. But as far as a normal person's life, it indicates that time that you're leaving that mental state of being. However, it's usually associated with a location. So, yeah, you have to make sure to do that. But also as you move along from there and you go through like the point where, you're making tents and doing things like that or doing other sort of stuff, that represents something. That's not a mental state right there. That represents a time in life where we're doing this and living this, unaware that we're just living life and haven't turned inward yet. There's also going to be very few people that turn inward. That's why this group gets very small, very fast. All right, so I guess the big point there is that leaving, at some point it might mean leaving your home place or whatever the case, whatever it may be. Ultimately, it's always a mental state. From the time that you went from a happy, I haven't judged anything, to now I have begun to judge things, but throughout life, I'm going to make millions of judgments. As many as there, we're going to see this sand on the beach, stars in the sky. All of those are going to represent our accumulation of judgments when we're in charge of our life up here. Okay, remembering this is very old stuff and we have to get into their shoes to understand it. We have a lot of our modern day biases. Now, one thing I probably, I explain this from time to time, but I should at this point in time too. I find that all of the material has to be mentally interactive. There's a point where I'm working through interpretation where I make a discovery about how something works. Flooding out the world and being naked in the end is about me. Oh, that's flooding out my world, and then I'm uncovered afterwards. Okay, I'm beginning to see what I need to do to interpret this. Now, what do I do with the rest of this stuff? You know what? If you do it with one thing, you got to do it with everything. It's how they made the story. That represents the time in life where you go, I'm going after this memory that is just screwing me up because I freaking hate it. But I realize what it's doing. I need to go after it. Stop being the victim, heal it so that it stops the cyclical pain is coming around. These are in the story. The cyclical pain is there because of something that we're hanging on to due to cause and effect. At some point, these become mentally interactive if you treat them all the same way. However, not only is it psychology, but it also dictates our flow in life. That this right here is what designates how our life experiences are. The mass of what we have up here, resolved and unresolved. It's not, a lot of people think it's what I'm holding consciously. Nope, it's what you've got. It's every bit of it. It's going to continue to get triggered. It's always there. It's not turned off just because it's not conscious. It's sitting there waiting for its turn to be on stage next. And as soon as it finds something in the environment to activate it, trigger it, bingo, here we are. It comes up into the conscious. Yeah, we can see that. They're there all the time. The only way to make them stop emerging is to make them stop existing under the terms that we have judged them. We must reclass. We have to feel differently about them emotionally. It's the emotional state that we hold them with that creates our flow in life, and that changing that literally creates variations in the success of our life. But when people try to create changes in the success of their life while leaving this in place, they find that they get little bits and pieces if they put out intensity, or it doesn't work at all, because people that teach that secret kind of stuff tell you this stuff is called so what. When the masters from antiquity say, you know what you want, remove the stuff that's in the way and it'll happen automatically. That's a Jesus, forgive the odd against your brother, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret. Leave your gift at the altar, life then unfolds better. So the teaching is very much a mental process all the time. It becomes very complicated to dissect that from really old material. It's hard to see that Adam and Eve and God, okay, then the disappearance of God. You know what? Let me just keep reading on. I'm getting sidetracked here. That was actually a part coming up here. What do we have? Early programming becomes the paradigm that, we become products of our experiences. And that we, at some point in time, we've left that behind. We've left our early life behind to become products of this. In fact, people don't make this connection very well. It's a very simple, common core teaching. Do you know the 4 agreements? Don Miguel Ruiz. Right here, there's one part here. Like I smashed my finger with a brick. Toltec knowledge arises from the same essential unity of truth as all the sacred esoteric traditions found around the world. Though it is not a religion, it honors all the spiritual masters who have taught on the earth. While it does embrace spirit, it is most accurately described as a way of life, distinguished by the ready accessibility of happiness and love. Toltec knowledge arises from the same essential unity of truth as all the sacred esoteric traditions found around the world. The agreements that we live through is the bundle of memories that we're talking about here, the mote in the eye, all of that. It's that simple. It's the pile of crap that we hang on to in our heads that are unresolved. Well, some of that stuff we're hanging on to is fine. We don't have to resolve it if it doesn't hurt us. We have to resolve the stuff that hurts. Happy memories are fine. It's the ones that hurt us that we're hanging on to. In very olden times, it was put in very complex ways. They had time on their hands. They needed to occupy that. Today, you can shorten it up. All right, I explored the idea more in a chapter I wrote called Abraham's Inner Journey. He's talking about a book that he's working on. For me, Abraham's story isn't just about following a divine instruction. It's about making the internal shift from who we were programmed to be to who we're actually meant to become. A spiritual paradigm shift. You know what? You're exactly right. I'm going to put it in different terms. I explored this area more in a chapter, for me. It's about making that internal shift from who we were programmed to be to who we're actually meant to become. It's not just about following a divine structure. Okay, yeah. All right, so here's the deal. It's a monomyth. It is a story that is built on human life template. Abraham would be the same thing as Noah was in chapter 6 and then in chapter 7 when the flood came about. The called person. Abram starts out as us. Abram and Sarai is us to begin with. We're going to go through some things. And when God reappears at that moment to change Abram into Abraham, that represents a change in iteration of us. That's our earliest self that was not aware. Our Adam, you're going to go live life attached to it, whatever, from shifting from that to the Noah. It's a different kind of a story. That the first 11 chapters are old. In fact, in those first 11 chapters, there's still references in there that prevent it from being a full-on monotheism until chapter 12. It's still a polytheism in 1 through 11. It's a blend. By the time you get to 12, that's when Genesis is finally a monotheism. When it gets down to here, what we have is it starts right off as an iteration of us. We're going to start sequencing these. As we go through the story, every bit of it plays out inside of the psyche. I am Abram and Sarai. I get corrupted. I go through some things. I become Abraham and Sarah. I have become healed. I've got other things going on now. As time goes on, even that's going to die off because we don't just go and heal one time. We have many. So who do we have? We've got the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Abraham dies off and becomes Isaac. We are still Isaac. Isaac dies off and becomes Jacob. We are still Jacob. It's constantly rolling out in the way these play out in the psyche. And I say the theater of the mind. You have to sit down and look through these things and go, I am that person. Oh, I'm living this life. Yes. Oh, my Sodom is my early self. That's that early paradigm that you're talking about that needs to be shifted, that needs to be destroyed. It's in the story. That paradigm shift is the destruction of Sodom and leaving it behind. And what happens when Lot's wife turns and looks? You have to escape the past. What happens if you can't escape Pharaoh? You finally do. It's a struggle. What happens if you look back? This is another way of showing the struggle to leave the past. If you can move on, look ahead, you're there. You look back, that's almost like the Daniel in the lion's den mental representation as well, too. Keep your eyes on what you want and stop focusing on the failures. Look at what is where you want to go, not at what you think is coming after you. Because we manifest what we focus on. So when you look and constantly look at the failure, you're going to get the failure. Anyway, so all of these are very complex stories that are going to be a very simple process all the time about inward healing. That makes it very difficult to see. It is incredibly old, and we just don't understand how complicated they are. We treat them so simply. We can't figure out the depth of what they had going on. We don't understand that their entire life was so different than ours with no technology. They're not doing stuff like this. They're talking face to face, or they're not talking. They're sleeping on a mat on a stone floor or on the dirt ground. They're grinding their bread. They're walking to whatever they're doing the next day. Their life is so different than ours. What would you do for a lifetime of not having technology? Can you imagine that? These stories would have filled that space. Okay. Where you talked about God disappearing and reappearing, I see it as awareness that's always there. We just lose our connection with it when we're deep in judgment and programming. The moment we begin to question the path we're on and reconnect with that inner knowing, everything starts to change. Yes, and that's exactly in the story. That's exactly what it is. You can call it what you want. It is really a higher awareness. Eckhart Tolle talks about this when he talks about when he first became aware of it. He's a much younger man at the time. He's in a fitful evening, tossing and turning, thinking in his mind, I can't even live with myself. But he starts becoming aware of the fact that he's got this inner dialogue where there's one person that can't live with the other person. And he's like, who is this other? Who are these two people in here? And he began to isolate the idea that something that is actually from antiquity, that's very old stuff. That when we're first born and we're those kids, when we're living happy before we are living through our memories, is that we're living through that higher awareness. We're alive, we're aware, we're non-judgmental, we're pure, we're blissful, we live in a happy state. In Genesis, that's represented exactly at day 7, where Adam and Eve are naked and unashamed in the Garden of Eden. First sin hadn't happened yet. That's the analogous and metaphorical representation of that part of a human's life from 6,000 plus years ago. However, as we begin to judge life, we lose connection with that. That happy state is the higher awareness. That is our natural state. That's the state we're born into. However, as we live life, we begin to experience physical life and we begin to remember and judge those things, and we begin to live through the judgments, emotionally and life-wise, experience-wise. The higher awareness is always there, and it'll come in and address us from time to time all throughout life. We're going to see it in the stories as we go through here, that higher awareness is always talking to you in life, but we don't know that it's there. It tells us you should do, it knows what to do, but we don't often do it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. When you understand it's there, this is typically, for me, I will describe it this way, that I can remember times where I would be in a fitful 3, 4 in the morning mental turmoil. I can't sleep. I've got something that's bugging me. I can't resolve it. I can't shut it off. I'm frazzled. I don't know why. It's just there. You get to a certain age, you accumulate enough stuff, you go into overload. All right, so as this dialogue is going on, periodically there's a voice that comes in that's completely detached from everything else that's telling you, hey, you got to let it go. There's nothing you can do tonight. You got to sleep. And you feel that when this voice is happening and you're talking to yourself, you feel disconnected from the emotions. You literally do. That's living with God. That's the higher awareness. That's living from that state right there. That's that voice that Eckhart was saying, this is who I really am up here. We all can see that. That's the voice that when we get it in our mind and we live from that place mentally, I say live from that place. What I mean is when we get into that mental state of existence, then we are detached. We don't feel our emotions. We're not caught up in them. We're not wrapped up in them. We're not emotionally caught up in them. Now, this higher awareness, I'm going to kind of pass it up and glaze over it in this video right here. I should probably do one on the Akashic Records or the idea of the Akashic Records or something like that. There's times I'm doing research. I'm looking through the material. I don't have answers. I don't know what this means. It's so old. It's so weird. I have to let it go. I don't find anybody that knows anything. But within a couple of days, I'll go back and read it again, and the answer is there. Where does that come from? Where does that answer come from? It happens to everybody. It happens in innovation sometimes. We continually pull stuff from someplace. Where is that? There's the idea that we emerge from a greater source and we return to that greater source. That would be it right here. People that are going down this road of consciousness as fundamental, they're looking at something like this going, what is that out there? I didn't go ask it. It came and addressed to me. When I'm there at night with that mental dialogue, is it a part of my brain that is normal and a part of everybody's brain? It might be a normal internal mechanism, or it looks like it's coming from outside, like there's a different sort of energy, entity, consciousness somehow that's on our side, but it's just right outside of our consciousness, right up above it, and it's not in our memories. Look at it and think about it. That's there. That's where we go. That's where we're coming. That's where we come from, and that's where we're going back to. However, while we're here on life, as what we need to understand is that we became those mental processes, and those mental processes are now being stored electrochemically, and that electrochemical combination is existing in a certain kind of a frequency that creates what? What you're going to attract is emotion. Shame attracts shame, fear attracts fear, love attracts love, things like that. We get together and everybody worships, and you get this big elevated feeling. People get together and protest, and they get a big elevated feeling that's negative. And in both cases, you achieve emotional states of being in a group that has some kind of a group dynamic going on that you can't achieve on your own. At some point, you have to look at that and go, yep, the field is there. I know it's there. I interact with it. I have interacted with it. I can see that there is an emotional field there. So it's a natural thing. We need to know that we're working with a natural process. But that because we're in those fields and we have those memories, that whatever the memories are for each person, they're going to be variable. And it's going to be up to you. It's really the way you hold the memory is going to continue to affect you. You can get to that higher awareness and go, okay, I see how to get here. Yet those things are going to still you're going to slip back into anything that is still in there. However, they are nevertheless a part of us. We can't just get to the higher awareness and leave them in place. Because they continue to get triggered. They have to be resolved. If you know the strong man is coming, if this is coming, you have to resolve these things that are getting triggered out. Just look and say to yourself, you don't want to ever do it again. You understood something different, and then let life go on. Did it quit, or does it keep going? If it's still going, it's not at all resolved. It needs to be gone. So, okay, so the higher awareness, yes, that's always there. But in the story, what you see is that God disappears, and then when Abraham starts, that is when God reappears. This very specifically is that reconnection to that higher awareness, knowing that, oh, that's very specifically this mental space from here. That's what that means. So and then from here, you can heal. God helps heal. We're building an altar. This is the altar we're building to God. Well, this is the place we want to reattach to. When we get somewhere down the road, you want to find that altar, which means I'm caught up in this. You know what to do. You know the right thing. There's that higher awareness reasoning. You have to know it's there, and we have to nurture it. Okay. So I want to say that's when I talk about God disappearing and reappearing, it's a higher awareness state of being that is something that we can look at and go, okay, I know exactly what that is. Yeah, that's a mental part of me that is disconnected from the emotions, and from here, I can heal the hurt because this is who I really am. I'm not those memories, but I've got those memories stored, and they're causing me to live life and experience life in the nature of what they are through cause and effect, so I must resolve them in order to change the way my cycles of life work. It's very scientific. It's very explainable. Okay, so everything starts to change. We connect with the inner knowing. Everything starts to change. Yep, we're going through a healing process there. You got it. So I totally resonate with the idea of this being a life template, just seeing it from a different angle. Thanks for putting it out there. These are the kind of conversations that really help people wake up and reflect. Yeah, and this is what the oddball thing is that I can look at this. There's a numbering pattern that I can get into and show you that it shows that it's man-made. It shows it's very carefully constructed. And it shows the same kind of construction in Babylonian material. But it gets so deep that people cease to follow along. It's like, here's the proof. But it doesn't, you know what? It's not proof if nobody can follow it. If people say, I don't see it, it's not there. It's not proof. You know, that 3-7 grid, the Eden, all that beginning right there. Day 3 is where cause and effect starts. 7 is naked, unashamed in the garden. Cause and effect, cycles, all of it preloaded right there. This is the beginning of life. This is how the story's going to start from this point. Male, female, pure state, cycles and cause and effect in place. Go run with the story. Cross a threshold, cross a river if you see that happening. Ezekiel, right off the bat, they're not going through childhood up to Abraham. They're starting like right at Abraham, except that this is Ezekiel, right at the beginning of a monomyth. The calling, God reappears, they're at a river ready to cross. Okay, if you were to look at the Joseph Campbell monomyth, it's a mental path. That crossing of the threshold is turning inward. The belly of the whale is being in the mind with the memories. His sequence is not exactly right. I learned the pathway by having to interact with it. I very much have interacted with understanding what this is. And I just saw the message you sent me about the, let me pull it up real quick, about the other, the author in the book right there. I went and took a look real quick. I clicked on the link and went and read up on it. And in fact, I pulled up a sample to read right here. I'm going to show you some things that I agree with and don't agree with. Eden is not a place. It is a state of consciousness. Agreed. Unified, undivided, whole. Eden is the state of being that we're in when we're a child that we can never get back to. You'll notice that they put away that you cannot return to it. That's because Eden was a state of consciousness, of bliss in ignorance. Once we have first sin, we will not have ignorance again. We have to get to a new place. We can't get back to Eden. Eden was ignorance through bliss. Now we have to, bliss through ignorance. Now we have to find bliss while not being ignorant, through knowledge, through awareness, through a disconnection. Eve is not as lesser. She is intuition, curiosity, the breath of seeking. I have no idea what he's talking about there. Eve is the inner self that emerges as a result. Eve becomes the bundle of memories. You can work with that. The serpent is not evil. It is energy, coiled, potent, divine. No, it's not. The serpent represents temptation. That actually, it's not just temptation. It's that we are. What is the tree? Eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We're going to go experience life. We're going to leave our childhood blissful state, and we're going to begin judging life and seeing things and feeling things that we don't like, and we're going to pick up shame, hatred, judgments, many different things that we become as a result. That the serpent, it is energy, coiled, potent, divine. Coiled, potent. No, the serpent is something that represents the idea that, like if we get to chapter 12, when we get into the corruption of Sarai, instead of the corruption of Eve here from the serpent, we have the corruption of Sarai from Pharaoh, who also, both of them on the story, represent the exposure to life unaware of it. And these are the things that you accumulate. Yeah, I can't use his stuff. It's not interactive. It's not in compliance with what I find. In fact, let me do a comparison here. We really have to step back from Genesis. We get our faces so close into it, we still think it's real, or parts of it are, or somehow that it holds something above everything else out there, when it does not. If we were to make a comparison with Greek myth, roughly contemporaneous with Genesis, the early Genesis stories, we're going to find a point where Zeus creates humans, and humans are ignorant. They're primitive. Prometheus, another god, feeling bad for the earthlings, gives them fire so that they can advance. Zeus doesn't like that. He takes fire away from them, and Prometheus gives it back to them again, steals it, gives it back to them. Humans advance anyway. And for punishment, Zeus chains Prometheus to the wall on some cliff someplace, and an eagle eats his liver out. And then the liver grows back, and the eagle eats it out again. The liver was thought to be the seat of emotion for the Greeks, and it was a painful act. So there's a repeating act right there of a painful act of something repeating over and over again. Now that's the same story as the Adam and Eve sin story. We have to separate from Genesis. When God tells Adam and Eve, don't eat from the garden of the knowledge of good and evil. Stay ignorant. Stay in the garden. Do not eat. They went ahead and did it anyway. They advanced and pain ensued. In the Greek story, Zeus represents the higher awareness. We're created. We're supposed to stay simple. However, what happens is that, in this case, it happened twice. Prometheus represents first sin. That gave us fire. We were supposed to stay primitive, but instead we advanced. And that as a result of that, Prometheus is the one who goes through the cyclical pain. But you see, the story elements are the same. We got to stop looking at Genesis like it's got some magical properties still left in above all else. It does not. I don't quite agree with what he has going on. I've got my own thing. And of course, we're all going to be that way. We're really looking for something that's obscure here. And I think everybody does need to be all over the place trying different things. But when I look here, what I finally, to myself, what I see here is that this is really the stages of my life, how I came about, and the stages of how I turn inward to heal, if I know how to navigate the pathway, and that's what it is. It's how the human comes about and how the human emerges from this larger source that we're always within, that we're going to flow through this source in life. The quality of that based on the nature of where we are and what we're maintaining in our mind, in the emotional state, in the storage of all the stuff that's there, the things that we're hanging on to. If we can let go of this stuff, we flow better. Sometimes you can easily let go of things. Sometimes you have to give it some sort of a mental engagement process until you can think it through to the point that you let it go. So it depends on what it is. You have to look at what triggers you, what cycles in your life that isn't okay. There's more to it than that. I've got a saying, you can't dry off when you're standing in the rain. You know, if you're in a situation that's not okay, it's not healthy, and you want to get somewhere else, but you have nowhere else to go, and as much as you're in an unhealthy situation, maybe you have a roof over your head and some food to eat, and if you left, because it's abusive also, you wouldn't have the abuse, but you wouldn't have food to eat or a roof over your head. There's decisions that have to be made sometimes where you're not going to heal. You can't dry off when you're standing in the rain. You're not going to heal when you're in situations like that. You're going to have to somehow be on a course. You know, looking at my own life, I can see that I have moved from place to place to place and gone from situation to situation. I have been on a path, a stage of life that somehow seems to correlate with whatever this is I'm finding in the material. It's like the path inward, the healing. You keep doing it over and over again. Anyway, okay, so that's what I want to say about it, that it really is not mystical at all. It totally is, when interpreted, the human life cycle and your flow in the cosmos and how you interact with yourself if you're the called person that's going to turn inward. Yeah. If you find the material and you can find how to put yourself in the material, I am that. I am. That means something kind of unique here. If you cannot put new wine into an old vessel, or it'll ruin the new wine and destroy the old vessel. But you must put new wine in a new vessel. I paraphrase that. I am that I am. I am the vessel. I am the wineskin. I cannot put new wine. What is wine? Life experience, new feeling. I cannot put a new feeling into my old self. I must first resolve my old self before I could put a new feeling in. If I try to move on and put new life into my old self, I'm going to destroy the new life, and it's going to make it even worse. These are how these work. We are the story. We are the verse. And if you treat one of them that way, you must treat every one of them that way. They just go all over the place. They're so clever, it's hard to pull it all in. Okay, that's what I wanted to comment on. I think we're really in a very similar place with a couple of variations there. You know, the subconscious, the God, what that is that comes and goes. The subconscious develops, Eve develops, our inner self develops. Soul, saying things like that. What is a soul? Jesus tells us, blessed are the poor in spirit. What's a spirit? How do you get a poor spirit? All of these things are going to represent, once interpreted, they're the bundle of memories that we're living through. The ought against your brother. If you have ought against your brother, go resolve it. Go become poor in spirit first. Then your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret, for yours is the kingdom of God. They're the same verse in the same teaching in different analogous verbiage, if you know how to read them. But you have to kind of learn that on your own. You've got to put yourself into the verse and work it out in your head repeatedly until it comes online for you. Okay, there's a numbering system that I can also bring up that shores things up. There's, I don't know if you've seen videos on those. There's 22 numbers collected in Genesis that appear well over 6,000 times throughout the Bible. And there's words repeated the exact amount of times of those, some of those 22 numbers as well. There's patterns that are at deep levels in here, and sometimes you see them within the verse and the chapter and the verse structure itself, because it's in the story structure. There's a pattern in here that is very purposeful, but it is so hard to see. And this video's gone on long enough, so I'm going to leave that one out of here. But there's something that I can say that if I pull that up, it absolutely shores up and confirms what I'm doing from my interpretation. That's how I got here and found such confidence with it, was found multiple ways of demonstrating that there's a pattern in here, that the pattern that we're talking about is there, but that pattern is going to be replicated many, many, many times in a numbering sequence that adds another layer of depth to it, makes it more difficult to see. Yet at the same time, it can make it easier to see. For me, it did, because I saw the repeating numbers. 22 numbers, 6,000 times in the Bible. Yeah, don't you see them? 3s, 7, 40, 5, 5,000, 13, 12s. You know, it's like, how come these keep showing up over and over again? And then when you go to Genesis, you find out that there's like 900s and 800s that are sharing space with those same numbers. And you wouldn't know it unless you were really digging into it and had the computer up, and you find out that, you know what, 900 is repeated exactly 7 times. It's being a surrogate for a 7, and it's gathering up numbers. 800, 7 times exactly. It's being used as a surrogate to grab up other numbers. People don't live that long. They're codes. You have to analyze them better. We're not looking at them right. But there's something very structured in there that is visible. They're not floating it all over the place. They're telling us within the story what to do if we knew what to do. We have to use the computer to analyze it. The same numbers are showing up as far as the Sodom analog farm. Would you destroy it for the sake of 50 righteous? No, not for 50 righteous. Not for 50 righteous? No, not for 50 righteous. Righteous is repeated 7 times. The numbers are going through this repeat sequence in there. And those are all the numbers. Those are analog farms. They're pointing to numbers. They're showing us a code that is there, that if you look at it and analyze it, you go, you don't have to guess. You can see what they're doing. There's a code included in there. But we don't have it memorized. We have to see it with the computer. It's very deep. In fact, let me very quickly show you this numbering pattern right here. You see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up through there. We get to 10, 12. Start jumping now. 15, 17, 20, 30, 40, 41, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. These are numbers that I have identified. And if we were to take day 7, we're naked, unashamed, and go to first sin, that's going to be 8. So what we're going to do is start stepping up a few numbers. 10 up to 11, 13, 21 above 20. Just take a little time for that to set in. What I'm going to do actually is not describe how the first sin and those numbers work in this case. What I want to do is show us that these numbers continually show up throughout the material, all of Abrahamic material. There is a structure in the background that we cannot see. What I want to do is point out that 3 and the 7 and the 12 right now and go to the book of Matthew. All right, this one's going to be very tight. It's going to be a special book. The book of Matthew, remember, we gathered the numbers in Genesis. Where does Matthew come from? This is New Testament. This is way downstream. This is way different authors. Nevertheless, let's look at those numbers. How many times does the number 3 appear in Matthew? 12 times. How about 7? 12 times. How about 12? 12 times. They're keeping a cross-reference. Do you want to know if these are good or bad? Watch this. David. Repeated 17 times. Do we see 17 here? 17 is the amount of times Sarai's name was repeated in Genesis. Abraham, exactly 7 times. Isaac, exactly 4 times. Jacob, six times. We need a bad element. Judas kind of sounds that way, don't we? Watch this. 8 times. See what happened there? That's where we jump to our 8. They're keeping close tabs on something, and we are clueless. You know what? I just showed you the tip of the iceberg. It doesn't stop. Seriously, grab those numbers of mine, download a King James Version to your computer, and start looking through every book of the Bible, and you will see that they're all following. Just pull up names right off the bat. Names of people, names of rivers, names of places. They're going to fit into this numbering category. The numbers themselves are repeated a certain amount of times, and then whether it's good or bad. Watch this. In Genesis, we've got Lamech right here, and took him 2 wives. This is up in, where are we? In chapter 4. Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Notice I have them color-coded. How many times does Lamech's name show up? Lamech is exactly 10 times, so Lamech is a good element on the list. We are Lamech. We're going to have a division. Adah, 8 times. That's the bad. If we go follow the story, that's going to be the bad direction to go. The other one is Zillah. 3. Zillah's name repeated 3 times. If we knew that, somebody has this very structured, that if you don't know what to do, if you knew how many times the names were repeated, you know which one is going aware and which one is going unaware. And I think the simplest way to explain it is like this. Do you see nakedness? If you were to look throughout the entire book of Genesis, if you counted or if you knew or if you used a computer, you would know that nakedness is repeated exactly 5 times. Because of that, that is where, after the flood, the sons of Noah covered up his nakedness. He had become naked and drunk inside of his tent, and he drank wine. Well, wine is a good thing, and nakedness is a good thing. By this numbering system, if you're reading this story and not interpreting it, you would think, well, the guy got drunk and he got naked in his tent. What a bad camping trip. I hope he didn't wake up in his vomit. However, if you look at it in a spiritual sense, you go, okay, wine is a way to feel. Nakedness is spiritual nakedness. That means this shame, this pain, this whatever I had that was a burden is not there anymore. So I know that wine and nakedness are both good things, and when I interpret them in a spiritual sense, that is what is going to guide me along the way if I knew how they weighted it by repeating it the amount of times necessary to give it a value of a good, pure thing or a sin, bad thing. All right. Well, hope this video was interesting. I wanted to comment on that. I'm pretty solid on what I've got going on. I see other people's work sometimes, and I see they've got some stuff that I have going on, but I think it's much more interactive than what he's got going on. I think it really comes down to a solid, nope, this is how you came about. And that mystical Eve and all that kind of stuff, that's your bundle of inner self. Adam, that is your mind, your conscious mind right there. That's your consciousness. And Eve is your inner self. And Eden is when the two of them are existing in concert. And you leave Eden once you start accumulating things within Eve that creates hurt, pain, and cyclical pain in childbirth. Yeah, it's really old stuff, but it is honestly an interactive path to healing. It is. We must be facing the same things as they did. Fear, pain, shame, lots of hurt. All right. Hope that explains myself better. See you in the next video.